Hi. For as long as I can remember, I have wanted to be a doctor. Like many people, I figured that this was a way for me to make a real and meaningful difference in this world. So for as long as I can remember, I did all of the typical pre-med things in high school. I was the president of the medical club, I was in National Honor Society, and I got into the Johns Hopkins University, the place that you go to become a pre-med. You see, I had my life entirely mapped out, a blueprint for how I was going to make a change in the world. But in the summer before coming to Hopkins, I was watching news coverage of the war on Syria. And there was a video of a car bombing, killed 30 people, most of them children. And I remember feeling absolutely devastated, not just at the massive human tragedy, but because that video forced me, somebody whose life and safety have always been reasonably guaranteed, to reckon with the fact that despite the fact that we all inhabit the same world, we live in entirely different ones. So that started me on this morbid investigation into everything that is wrong with the world. And boy, is there a lot. You know, there are millions of people suffering every day from preventable, or rather, should be preventable problems. Needless violence, environmental devastation, severe racism, hatred, inequality, and not just in countries half a world away, but in our very own cities. These weren't failings of medicine. They were failings of society. Another thing I realized in my investigation is that if you really wanted to see what made big change in the world, what really got something moving in a certain direction, you had to follow the money. So I decided that if I wanted to make change on a larger scale, I should go into business. Should have probably done my research because Hopkins doesn't actually offer a business degree. So when I got to campus, I did the next best thing. I joined the business fraternity, which ended up being one of the best decisions of my life, and I became a computer science major, which was not. But one day, in intermediate programming class, I sat next to that kid, Anthony. And he, over the summer, had started a group chat for people who were interested in entrepreneurship. And I figured that entrepreneurship was a type of business, so I might as well join. We called that little chat the Crazy Ones. Yes, after that Apple quote. And over summer, we had imagined a Hopkins where any student could build out any idea that they had, that they could pursue any passion, regardless of the form that might take. But sitting there in that classroom, we realized that there were actually remarkably few resources for students who wanted to turn their ideas into reality outside of the classroom or lab. There was no entrepreneurship club, no makerspace, no incubator. And so we decided that we had two options. We could either accept that Hopkins didn't have an entrepreneurial ecosystem, or we could be the ones to build it. The only problem being that we actually had no clue what we were doing. You see, universities will pay people tens of thousands of dollars to come in and set up entrepreneurship programs. And we were just a group of freshmen who barely had an idea what we were even building. So we Googled everything. We called other universities. We talked to anybody who we could force to listen to us. And slowly, surely, and making more mistakes than I care to admit, we built a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem at the Johns Hopkins University. That became TCO Labs, my first nonprofit built alongside Brooke, Anthony, and a dozen other talented individuals. So after about a year of helping students independently, we decided that it would be smart to start a formal program to teach students how to build startups, small businesses, and nonprofits, an incubator. But we hadn't really planned for this. And since we had a small team, suddenly it became my responsibility to teach students how to build ventures. And let me just frame how ridiculous this was. You see, that very year, I had won a grant from the university, $10,000 to build out an idea that I had for a software company. And as soon as I got that money, I was mortified because I realized that I actually had no plan for how to turn an idea into an actual company. So after 4 months of floundering around and spending $500 on purchasing URLs, I returned the money to the university. I had absolutely, utterly failed. And now it was my job to teach other students how to not do that. See, there wasn't a single day that imposter syndrome didn't linger over everything that I did. You know, what possibly made me qualified to tackle this problem? But eventually I realized that sometimes the only qualification you have to build something is the fact that you are the one who's willing to build it. So that became the Hatchery, the incubator portion of TCO Labs. And through my work there, I realized that there were a ton of people, not just at Hopkins, but elsewhere, who wanted to build out solutions to these big problems that our world faced. But they simply didn't know how. And so I became obsessed with this idea of helping as many people as possible become entrepreneurs. And I feel like this needs a little bit of explanation, because when I say entrepreneur, I do not mean the tech bros in hoodies building the next Uber for puppies, right? Entrepreneurs are an incredibly diverse bunch. It is everybody from the small business owner supporting their local economy to the doctor introducing life-changing medical devices onto the market. But what unites them all is a desire to bring something new into the world. You see, entrepreneurs are the ones who look around and decide that they are dissatisfied with the way that things are, and that they are going to attempt to change it by bringing about something different. And you see, different is what we need. There's this famous misquote by Albert Einstein that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But that's what we do as a society. Excuse me. We go into the same careers. We seek out the same prestigious titles at the same big firms. We follow the same path as all of our peers, and then we are surprised when the world doesn't change. And I realized that crawling up the corporate ladder at some big company or selling my soul to the highest bidder on Wall Street was not actually going to make a difference. You see, big business has its hands so tied by profit and politics that it can be nearly impossible to make meaningful change from within those systems. And so that's when it's hit me. If we wanted to make change in the world, we needed to make more entrepreneurs. And I wasn't kidding myself. I knew that building out one entrepreneurial ecosystem at one elite institution wasn't going to make much of a difference. And so over the next 2 years, I worked a lot in Baltimore's innovation ecosystem. And I noticed that there were still systemic barriers that kept talented people from building out their ideas. You know, resources were still stratified based on class, race, and geography, which often meant that the people who were experiencing these problems, the ones who were the best suited to build out solutions, were unable to. And so I started 2 more ventures to do my small part at addressing this issue. One was Innovate Maryland, a nonprofit that supports young entrepreneurs across the state and works to keep talented graduates within the city. And then leaving my nonprofit safety net, EcoMap Technologies, a company that uses automation to map out entrepreneurial ecosystems, making it easy for any entrepreneur to find the resources that they need to build a venture. My goal became to reduce the barriers to entry to becoming an entrepreneur, because somebody should not need to go to a top 10 institution, or any institution for that matter, to be an entrepreneur. And so to be an entrepreneur. And so part of that is building productive entrepreneurial ecosystems, the type that make it easy to introduce solutions to big problems. But in order to build productive ecosystems, we need to build equitable ecosystems, ensuring that everybody, regardless of their demographics, has equal access to not only the capital, but also to the connections and education that are needed to build out successful ventures. And part of that is building robust and productive entrepreneurial ecosystems. But the other part of that equation is convincing more people to become entrepreneurs. And this is the hard part, because that requires convincing people that it's not so scary. And I think a big part of that fear is just a fear of the unknown. See, unlike becoming a doctor, there is no set path to becoming an entrepreneur. And I'm no psychologist. I don't necessarily know how to eliminate fear of uncertainty, but I think it starts with us entrepreneurs being honest about our experiences. So let me start with the good stuff. Being a student entrepreneur has been pretty damn fun. I spoke at my first conference when I was 21 years old, and let's just say I was the only person getting ID'd at that open bar. I start my mornings meeting with the Department of Commerce or venture capitalists, and I know what it is like to sit at a table with powerful people and know that my voice is being heard. I get to wake up every morning absolutely loving what I do and knowing that I am making a difference, at least in the lives of some students. And I get to give talks like this. But I would be absolutely lying if I told you that it was always that sexy. In reality, it rarely is. I have left final exams having only filled out half the test because I forgot that I had a meeting downtown. I almost got TCO's nonprofit status revoked because I forgot to submit paperwork because I had a midterm that week. You see, when it comes to this whole student entrepreneur equation, I have been constantly inadequate on one side or the other. And that took a lot of getting used to. So did the sleep deprivation. In my junior year, in a desire to have it all, 3 ventures, straight A's, and a modicum of a social life, I slept only 4 nights every week. I learned how to stay awake in class by sitting in the front row with my foot beneath me, so that the pain of it falling asleep was enough to prevent me from doing the same. And I've had 4 panic attacks. One walking to a meeting, one in the middle of a meeting. But the 2 that I remember is I was sitting at my desk, sobbing, heaving, barely able to breathe, but still typing out emails because I had work that needed to get done. You see, in reality, entrepreneurship is this stressful, emotional, painful endeavor. So why have I made it my life goal to put as many people through this as possible? Because we have to be honest with ourselves. We are hurtling towards an unsustainable future that none of us want. And we need more entrepreneurs than ever to turn that around. We need millions of passionate people working relentlessly to build new and better solutions. We need people to make drastic change. And this type of change isn't easy, because unlike what I thought in high school, there is actually no blueprint for how you make a difference. And having a plan is nice. It makes us feel like we have some amount of control in this crazy world. But plans change, often drastically. And so instead of worrying about whether or not we have every facet of our lives planned out, maybe we should just start planning for change. Planning for things not to go the way that we expected. Planning to abandon our original goals for the sake of new opportunities. And yes, planning to fail, because failure isn't an end, it's just a slightly different beginning. See, Instead of leaving Hopkins with a medical school acceptance letter, I am leaving it with 3 ventures. And I hope these ventures make a difference by empowering the entrepreneurs who are working on these hard problems in our society. And while my ventures are indeed my babies, none of them were planned. So don't worry right now if you don't have a plan. And don't worry if you suddenly find that your well-crafted life plan collapses in front of you. Survey all of the new opportunities that you have. Slowly connect the dots, and you'll find your own way towards making a change. Thank you.